Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This time I'm presenting a pure Trickstar deck. This time it's not my Winwitch Trickstars as it's been in the past. I decided to take it apart, throw my Winwitches in my newly built Invoker deck, which I'll present later on. Well anyway, I thought I'd just, experiment with some other cards and see which build I like better. So this is basically pure Trickstars, has nothing really, no Sky Strikers or anything like that, but I found a way just to make it more of a stun-based build where you can cancel out a lot of decks, and I found a pretty good hand trap that really works well with this deck because I noticed a lot of spells that special summon monsters lately, and like Soul Charge, Monster Reborn, or even ritual cards, even ritual decks are starting to make a comeback. So anyway, let's get on to it. So starting off, you're going to be playing 3 copies of Trickstar Candina. It's standard. This is your main searcher. Basically your Stratos, and she burns your opponent for 200 points of damage for each time your opponent activates a spell or trap, but I like the fact that she can search out any Trickstar card you want. Next you'll be playing is 3 copies of Trickstar Licorice, also standard. The best Trickstar card in the entire deck in my opinion. It's a quick effect where you can reveal this card, target 1 Trickstar monster you control, except itself, bounce it back to the hand, and then special summon this card in its place. And each time your opponent acts cards from his deck to his hand, you burn 200 points of damage, and this also includes when your opponent draws, so that's also what makes this card broken. And lastly, 1 Lilybell. Only played at 1 though, just because you never really want to draw into it. But if you search it out and add it to your hand, you can special summon this card for free, and it's only once per turn to do that part. But it's good because you can attack your opponent directly with this card, and if you inflict battle damage, you get to add any Trickstar monster from your graveyard back to your hand. So it's a good way, just to spam it out with Licorice and all that stuff. And if you're running the Firewall OTK build or engine, it's really busted just for that purpose. Alright, so moving on, we got, of course, 2 copies of Eater Millions. I was going to try to play it at 3, but I found 2 was a little bit better just because of one reason. We're running the 1 Cyber Dragon. Cyber Dragon's just really good because, it cancels out the extra link boards to make Mega Fleet Dragon, so it's really good. So, but only run it at 1 because it is pretty cloggy after that. So, but Eater Millions is just good because it helps you get around powerful boss monsters like Borlo Dragon, Boral Sword. Well, actually, Boral Sword, technically speaking, because even if he puts it in defense mode but he attacks over it, Eater Millions will still banish it. But generally, you don't want to attack it, of course, because if you do, he's going to switch you into defense mode, and then you'll find a way to pop it later. So anyway, overall I thought this was a pretty good small engine just to run. For the hand traps, standard, you're going to be running 3 copies of Drone Logbird, literally the best hand trap in the entire format for right now, in my opinion, and 2 Ash Blossoms. And Drone Logbird is just great because it basically just puts your opponent to a position where you can barely play Yu-Gi-Oh at all. Ash is just good, just to stop your opponent from doing specific searches that could be a problem, or sending cards from your deck to the graveyard, or special summoning a monster directly from the deck, For the last hand traps, I decided to run this, Retaliating Sea. The reason I've run it is because, again, I noticed a lot of decks are reliant on cards like Soul Charge. Even Sky Strikers are very reliant with cards like Hornet Drones, because, it gives them the tokens they need to, get into their link plays, and anything that runs a Sky Striker engine in general, And that's actually the biggest key, is Sky Striker Hornet Drones is being splashed in just about any deck right now. So the reason I'm running Retaliating Sea is because it has a really interesting effect. So whenever your opponent uses a spell card to special summon a monster, you can special summon this card from your hand, and if you do, while this card is face up on the field, any card that normally would go to the graveyard gets banished instead. So this is basically Banisher of Radiance, I believe is the card from the typical stun deck. But yeah, Retaliating Sea is really dangerous towards pretty much any deck that runs an engine like that, because they have to question, do they want to keep going, because they're going to be forced to lose a lot of resources. And what sucks is that, let's say you're up against Sky Strikers, any card that goes to the graveyard gets banished, so that means they're not going to get any advantage for having 3 or more spells in the graveyard anymore. So that means they're just going to have to stop. So yeah, that's really bad. So again, you chain off that Hornet Drones, the Hornet Drones is going to be gone, and Kagari's not going to be able to bring it back. Or if you're going against Goki, if they happen to open up with that Soul Charge, immediately play this, because after they start using up all their materials, yeah, that's it. They're going to start losing it, and Phoenix Blade won't do much else. And if it goes to the graveyard, that's it. They're done. So that just weakens their sources by a lot. So I think Retaliating Sea is definitely a great hand trap to consider. That's why I decided to run it in the first place, because of how powerful it can really be. And I even tested it out on YGO Pro. It's just really dangerous. Moving on to spells already. We're going to go into 3 copies of Trickstar Lifestage. Pretty standard. Another main searcher. And the fact that it can lock down your opponent's face-down cards once per turn is really good. And of course, at the end phase, he either has to activate it or just send it straight to the grave if you can't activate it. And of course, you're going to be running 3 terraformings. Again, standard, because you got to be able to, search it out as quickly as you can. And another standard, 3 scapegoats. Back then, I used to be against playing scapegoat, but now I see like the biggest benefit with it. So I mean, but that was back when I was playing Trickstars when they first started. But now that I see the capabilities of scapegoat, now I appreciate the card a lot more. So yeah, triple scapegoat, definitely a great card. We're running 2 copies of Cosmic Cyclone, only 2, just because like it helps me get around floodgates, like Royal Decree. What else is there? Or not Royal Decree, I'm sorry, Imperial Order. That's the one I was thinking of. My bad. Imperial Order, Anti-Spell Fragrance. You got to get those kind of cards off the field. Or problematic field spells that could really hinder you. Like even like I still see Spiral players every now and then, so get rid of that Resort, and that pretty much just kills. Well, it doesn't kill the deck entirely, but it really slows them down a little bit. So yeah. And as for one-us, only 1 Desires. I tried playing it at 2. It hindered me way too much. I just kept losing too many. I kept losing Lilybell mostly every time I played this card, so that's why I only play it at 1 now. So I'd rather just search out everything I need first and only play Desires if absolutely necessary. 1 Raigeki, of course. I mean, it helps, like the fact that this deck is built to stun your opponent's plays, or if he decides to run a Scapegoat against you, go into your main phase 2. Well, normally, most people who play Scapegoat always activate it at the end of the turn, but you never know. We got 1 Dark Hole, which is really good still, and 1 Monster Reborn. And that's pretty much it for the one-ofs. For the traps, I decided to main deck 3 Torrential Tributes. Again, you want to stun your opponent, keep him from really extending his link play, so Torrential Tribute's definitely necessary for that purpose. And this deck's built to go first, by the way, so that's why it's definitely necessary to run Torrential Tribute. And of course, 3 Reincarnation, which is really good for like wiping out cards like Evenly Matched or Ghost Reaper or anything that's real. Actually, no, I'm sorry, not Ghost Reaper. I don't know where I was thinking about that one. I was thinking of a different card, or cards like, let's say I was up against Spirals. They use I think it's Super Agent. I could be wrong on that one. The one that pops, if you call it right. But yeah, if you play Reincarnation, it basically cancels that out. But yeah, gotta get rid of Evenly Matched. Pretty much anything or if your opponent decides to do a search, play 1 Reincarnation, discard your Drone Lockbird, and he loses his hand entirely. So that's usually the best way to play Reincarnation now. Alright, so for the extra deck, we're running 1 Trickstar Holy Angel, pretty standard, and I still think it's a great link monster to play, especially because it just requires 2 Trickstar monsters to summon it. But each time a Trickstar monster is normal or special summoned to this card's link points, you can inflict 200 points of damage, and this card gains 200 points, or 200 attack points each time a Trickstar monster does burn damage. I run the 1 Crimson Heart, which helps you replenish your life points, but I like it because it's basically 1 Day of Peace. You discard 1 Trickstar card, and if both you and your opponent draw 1 card, but if your points are higher than your opponent's by 2,000, you get to draw 2 cards. Another good staple I run is 1 Hippo Shingun, since all your monsters are basically light attribute, with the exception of Eater Millions, of course. Just requires 2 light monsters, and what's great about this is that it gives your light monsters 500 extra attack and defense points, so it's a good way for your minor Trickstar monsters to get a little bit of a power boost. That way they can beat over a little bit stronger monsters. And also all dark monsters on the field lose 400 attack and defense points. And if this card is destroyed in battle or by card effect, you can target 1 light monster in your graveyard and add it to your hand. So it's another good way to recycle your cards. I was debating if I wanted to play this or not, but I found that it was actually pretty helpful. It's basically my reasoning of this deck. 1 Akashic Magician. Just requires 2 monsters with the same type except tokens, but what's great about this is that if this card is co-linked to another monster, you can declare a card name, excavate your deck, equal to the number of ratings, like link ratings, and by that it's talking about this thing. So like, let's say I was co-linked with Space Insulator, for example. It's basically this thing, which by the way comes to our next monster, Space Insulator. But he's just there for link materials. But let's say Akashic and Space Insulator were co-linked with another. Their ratings totals 4. So you call a card name, excavated, and if any of those 4 cards were happen to have that copy of any copies of that card, you get to add them all to your hand, but the rest goes straight to the grave. So it's a good way to search out. You like let's say you called Candina or Scapegoat or Trickstar Light Stage. You pretty much call anything you want. But again, it's just one of those cards you kind of have to take a gamble on. And in Space Insulator, he's just there just because he requires 2 monsters to summon, so I could use tokens. And he just goes into easy Link 3 to Link 4 plays. Moving on to the next Link 2, we got 1 Pentastag. I like it because any monsters that, if your Link monsters attack a defense position monster, they inflict 200. They can inflict piercing damage. I'm sorry. So Pentastag's really good. So, just for cards like Transcode Talker, Firewall Dragon, maybe Decode Talker, but yeah, cards like that just really help you out. So that's one of the reasons why I run Pentastag. For other stables, just for Link materials, 1 Link Spider. Link Karibo's really good, because you're running Scapegoat, so Link Karibo's definitely a must. Underclock Taker, pretty standard. Mainly just to get into more Link plays, as I mentioned. I found Ib was really good in this deck, because, this card can't be, if this Link card cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects, and if your opponent can't target this Link card with card effects, so it's really good. If a monster this card points to would be destroyed by a card effect, you can send this card to the graveyard instead. So it's another way to protect your monsters, essentially. So it's not too bad. So moving on to our Link 3s, we got 1 Topologic Trisbana. Really good, because if you happen to have a spare Scapegoat that you want to use later, just summon the tokens and then use this effect to banish the tokens, and then you can banish all spells and traps out on the field and inflict 500 points of damage to your opponent. 1 Transcode Talker. I was experimenting with this card, and it's actually pretty good. What I like about it is that if this card is co-linked, the co-linked monsters gain 500 attack and defense points. Or sorry, just 500 attacks, I'm sorry. I forgot these things don't have defense points. So, disregard that. And also, you can target 1 Link 3 or lower Cyberse Link monster in your graveyard, except itself, special summon it, and generally, yeah, it's just a good way to bring back your Pentastag, your Underclock Taker. I won't really recommend bringing back Space Insulator at any given point. Just, get that Pentastag out, because that card's a lot better. Because, again, you want to be able to do piercing damage. Moving on, you got 1 Decode Talker, which is pretty standard. And finally, Firewall Dragon, because we do perform the Firewall OTK. So that's why Firewall is still necessary, and might as well enjoy it while it's still legal, because it has the highest probability of being banned. And finally, to go with our Cyber Dragon, as I mentioned, is Chimeratech Mega Fleet Dragon. Gotta have it if you're gonna run Cyber Dragon. So it's just a good way to clear out boards. For the side deck's a little short, so I'm still trying to find other cards to fill in for it, but for now, I decided to go with these. We got 2 Forbidden Dress, which helps us avoid cards like Infinite Impermanence. Even though your monster will lose 600 attack points, it cannot be targeted or destroyed by other card effects. We got the 1 Upstart Goblin. And as I mentioned, another Pot of Desires, if we actually need it. But in general, I don't like it. So, for this deck, really, so that's why I only run it at 1 in the main. We got 2 Curse Seal, the Forbidden Spill. Actually a really good side card, because it helps you really lock down certain decks, like Invokers. Invokers are making a strong comeback, Sky Strikers. So generally what it does, you discard 1 spell card, negate the spell, any spell your opponent activates and destroy it, and for the duration of the duel, your opponent cannot activate any other copy of that spell card if he has it, So that means cards like Invocation. You use this on Invocation, that's it. Invocation's done, but you got to be careful that Magical Meltdown's not in play or anything, because Magical Meltdown keeps you from negating fusion summons. But if you can get rid of that Magical Meltdown in time and play this on that Invocation, then you'll be fine. Other side cards like Disturbance Strategy, just to help us bait out Ash Blossoms whenever they try to cancel out the Reincarnation, and Present card, Pretty standard stuff just to get a little turbo burn on your opponent. But overall, nothing too great. Anyway, that's all I got for you guys today on this video, and I'll catch you guys again next time.